All right, here's our lesson video for day 8.2. We're talking about slope again, but we're also talking about midpoint, distance, and then something called arc length that we've talked about in previous lessons. We're going to get back to that. So we're just going to go over these formulas here to review what they mean, and then we're going to use those down the road. Okay, so the midpoint formula, all right? The midpoint formula is used to find the XY ordered pair, the point, in the middle of a segment. Okay, there's your formula. You add the x's, divide by 2. You add the y's, divide by 2, because you're finding the average of the x's and the average of the y's. That's midpoint. But we also have a formula for calculating distance in the coordinate plane. Okay, the distance formula tells me the length of a segment or the distance between two of those points. And there's that distance formula. We've used that a little more recently, but we hit distance hard in the beginning of this year. Okay, first semester we talked about distance a bunch. We kept coming back to it over and over and over again to remember how to do that. And then last lesson we even reviewed slope. Okay, slope is what over what? Rise over run. Now, and remember that rise and run are calculations from the y values and x values. The rise is always the difference of the y's, like y2 minus y1. The run is the difference of the x's, x2 minus x1. You'll notice those are also parts of the distance formula, right? So pay attention to this little hint here. You've already found the differences of y's and x's from the distance formula. So if you're finding all three formulas for the same two ordered pairs, you can kind of shorten your work a little bit because you're doing this part over and over. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn the page and practice this. Okay, so as we look at these different ordered pairs I'm giving you, we're going to find the midpoint, length, and slope for both for one segment at a time. So we're going to start with these first two ordered pairs. A is at 3, -2. B is at -5, 1. We're going to find the midpoint first. All right. Remember, the midpoint formula is add the x's, divide by 2, add the y's, divide by 2. Midpoint is the only one where we add. Slope and distance, we subtract, but midpoint we add. So what's our first x that we have? Okay, so when I go to plug this in, that would be 3 plus, what's the other x? So we actually don't even write it as +5 or plus -5, we write it as -5 then. Plus negative means minus. And then we divide that by 2. What's our first y? -2, and then we add our second y to that. And then we just start to simplify these. You might get fractional answers. Since we're dividing by 2, the only way you'd have to write it as a decimal is do 0.5, but you might not have to. When we do 3 minus 5, that should be -2, but I have to divide that by 2 still. And -2 plus 1 is -1. So I could write my answer as -1, -1/2, because -2 divided by 2 is -1, or I could use decimals. I could make it -1, -0.5. Those mean the same thing. Any questions about that? Now we're going to use our distance formula to find length. Remember, distance is that long square root formula. For distance, we're going to subtract the x values, x2 minus x1 squared, and then subtract the y values and square it, y2 minus y1 squared, then add them and then take the square root. So again, that second x value was -5. So I'm going to do -5 minus that first x value, 3. That's the difference of the x's squared. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the y values. That would be 1 minus -2 turns that into +2. You could put this all in the calculator at one time if you use parentheses the correct way. Most of you don't. So I would rather us do the work on paper and simplify this a little bit first. So we can do -5 minus 3. What's -5 minus 3? -8. I want you to write it as parentheses -8 squared. Because if you just put -8 squared in your calculator, you're going to get a negative answer for that part, and that's not correct. 1 plus 2 we should know is 3. We're going to square that. So let's simplify a little bit more. What is -8 squared? Not times 2, squared times itself. It's -8 squared. 64, positive 64. Good. And 3 squared? 9. So then I add those together. We do not take the square roots separately. Okay, we have to add them together and take the square root at the end. It gives me 73 under the radical. So what is the square root of 73 rounded to the nearest tenth? You guys going to just 8.5. Okay. You'll usually get a decimal for your distance. Not always, but usually you will. Okay, so we've discovered what is halfway between A and B. We've discovered how far apart A and B are. Now we need to look at the slope of the segment from A to B. Okay, your slope formula, we just did that last time. That's the difference of the y values on top, y2 minus y1, over the difference of the x values, x2 minus x1. Now, we've already done those here. We've already done those differences, so we can already write those parts in without a lot of extra work. The difference of the y's, we wrote as 1 plus 2. The difference of the x's, we wrote as -5 minus 3. We also simplified those already. 1 plus 2 is 3. -5 minus 3 is -8. So we just have that fraction. Can that be reduced? No, so we just write it as -3/8. That's our slope. Any questions about slope? Here's what I want us to do. Number 2, this next row, we're actually going to hold off on that one. I'll do that one with you in a second, but I want you to skip down to number 3, and I want you to try number 3 on your own. Okay, I'll pause the video for those that are watching the video here, but I want you to try number 3 on your own, and then we'll check those answers. These are the answers we should get. 3 is your midpoint, 10.8 is your distance. So I'll kind of zoom in so you can see what we did there in case you made a mistake. Because that ordered pair A has a -2, when you do the difference of your x's, you got to change it to 8 plus +2. Minus -2 becomes plus positive if you're doing that order. Okay, so the difference of the y or x's is 10. They're 10 apart. Difference of the y's is 4 or -4. They're that far apart. But that negative does play a factor into our slope. Okay, the negative ends up going away on our distance formula because you're squaring it. But on the slope, it stays there. So your slope should be -2/5. Any questions? All right, I said we'd skip number 2. I want to go back to it now. The reason I kind of waited on number 2 to do with you is that this ends up being a special case. What do you notice is unique about these 2 ordered pairs? They both have 9s in place of what variable? They're the y values. They both have a y value of 9. So imagine a graph where both points have the same y value. Are they going to be lined up horizontally, 9 and 9 like that, or vertically? They have the same vertical value, which makes them side by side horizontally, right? Okay, these would both be at 4, 9, and 2, 9. They'd be lined up like that if you're going to graph them. You don't have to, but that's what they have in common here. So when we do our formulas, you're going to notice some special cases. So our midpoint formula, again, we add the x's, 4 plus 2, and divide by 2. Add the y's, 9 plus 9, and divide by 2. Then we start to simplify. 4 plus 2 is what? 6. So we got 6 over 2 again, which will be 3. And then 9 plus 9 is 18 over 2. But what's 18 divided by 2? It goes back to being 9. Notice how it has the same y value as the other 2. Well, that's because it's a horizontal line. If they're lined up horizontally with the same y value, anything between them, like the midpoint, would have the same y value also. Now, that would also kind of work the same if they were lined up vertically with the same x values. Okay? Now let's look at our distance formula again. This is where we subtract the x's. So instead of 4 plus 2, we would do 4 minus 2 and square that. And we subtract the y's. So 9 minus 9 and square that. What's 4 minus 2? Somebody tell me. 4 minus 2 is not 3. 4 minus 2 is 2. So we got 2 squared. And then 9 minus 9, 0. So I got to square that. 2 squared is 4. 0 squared is 0. 4 plus 0 is, what's the square root of 4? What do you multiply by itself to get 4? 2. That should make sense to us. Look back at these ordered pairs. When you look at these, how far apart are 4 and 2 on that number line? What's the distance between 4 and 2? 2. When they're lined up horizontally, we could actually count the distance if we had the graph. So that's why our distance formula works out so simple. If you have the graph, yeah. If you have the graph, you can only count horizontally or vertically. If they're diagonal at all, if there's any kind of a slope other than 0 or undefined, then you can't count. All right. So let's talk about slope now. The slope is rise over run. Difference of the y values, we already have from the equation on distance. 9 minus 9. We already have the difference of the x values too. 4 minus 2. 9 minus 9 for the y values is 0. 4 minus 2 is 2. That fraction, 0 divided by 2, gives us 0. You should remember, these are horizontal. Horizontal lines have a slope of 0. So let's jump down to number 4. On number 4, do they have something in common?
2's.
They have the 2's, but they're not the y values, they're the x values. These are both the x values. So let's do our midpoint formula again. We're going to add the x's, 2 plus 2 divided by 2, and add the y's, 1 plus 9 divided by 2. 2 plus 2 is 4, but then I got to divide that by 2, goes back to being 2. Same thing as the other x values. 1 plus 9 is 10. When we divide that by 2, we get 5. There's your midpoint. Notice that the 2's kind of just stay the same. So really, we're just looking at what is halfway between 1 and 9. Okay? And so you can do that by adding them up, divide by 2. That's the easiest way to do that. For distance, take the difference of the x values, 2 minus 2, and square it. And the difference of the y values, 1 minus 9, and square that. This time the x values give us a difference of 0 because they're the same thing. 1 minus 9 is negative 8, but I got to square that. Negative 8 squared is positive 64. So 0 plus 64 is just 64. So the square root of 64 goes back to being 8. How far apart are 1 and 9 vertically from each other?
8.
They're 8 apart, right? You could count that because it's vertical. These x values are the same, mean that these line up vertically. There's 9 up at the top, there's 1 down below. Okay, they line up vertically. So when I go to do my slope, I'm going to take the difference of the y values, 1 minus 9, over the difference of the x values, 2 minus 2. That gives me negative 8 over 0. When you have 0 on the bottom of a fraction, what do you get for an answer? Undefined. Okay? When you have 8 over 0 or anything over 0, you can't do that mathematically. Okay? So now we are going to do the same kind of things. We're going to find the requested measurement, but this time from the graph. So we're not going to do all 3 this time. We're just going to find one. Let's make sure we're staying off of our phones right now and following along with the notes. This time it says find the length. It says just find the length of the segment. Well, what formula do you think I'm going to use for length? What? I didn't hear that. Say it louder. Distance. Thank you. Now, yes, we can use the distance, but if you remember, we talked about slope last time. We actually turned this into a triangle on the graph, right? We made it a right triangle. And if I draw in those lines and I count the distances, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vertically, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 horizontally, you have two sides of a right triangle. How do I find the third side? A squared plus B squared equals C squared, the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, they both work out the same way. This one example, I'm going to show you both methods, and then you get to choose which one you do if you have the graph. I'm actually going to do the Pythagorean theorem first. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Okay? A squared, I'll just use 6 as my A. B squared turns into 8 squared. So then I can go through and simplify these. What's 6 squared? Good. What's 8 squared? 64. What do I get when I add those? Somebody else. 100. So how do I, that's not my answer though. That's not how far apart they are. It's not the length of that segment. How would I find out my final answer? Square root both sides to get C by itself. What is the square root of 100? No, I just didn't finish writing it. 10. So the length is 10. Like I said, the distance formula should give you the same thing. I'm actually going to quickly kind of show you that it gives you the same thing. But to do distance formula, you need the ordered pairs. So this bottom left corner, what would the ordered pair be there? -5, -5. The top right corner up here. Sorry, up here. What's that one? 3, 1. Good. So for my distance formula, I'm going to do the difference of the x's first. So I would do -5 minus 3 squared. Then the difference of the y's next. -5 minus 1 squared. Well, -5 minus 3 is -8. -5 minus 1 is -6. When I square each of those, I am back at 64 and 36. When I add them, I get 100. I'm going through kind of fast, but you see it parallels what we're doing in the Pythagorean theorem. Square root of 100 is still 10. I don't care which method you use. Some people are going to look at this and think, Pythagorean theorem is kind of confusing. I don't want to do that. Don't. Do the distance formula instead. But to do the distance formula, you have to write the ordered pairs. Okay? All right. So I want you to try this next one on your own. Do the same thing. If you're watching the video, I'll pause the video, give you time to do that. Make sure you click play when you're ready to check that answer. Okay, if you need some more time, pause the video if you're watching the video. Otherwise, these are the answer, or this is the answer you should get. If you used whichever method you get, should give you the same thing. What did we get? 3 point what? Rounded wrong. 3.5. We should get 3.5. Let's say I did the Pythagorean theorem. Okay. The difference of the y values is 2. Difference of the x values is 4. Do 2 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared. 2 squared is 4. It's not 3.5. Jacob.
4 squared is 6.
There you go, not 8. I didn't catch that. 4 plus 16 is 20. So we take the square root. It's 4.5. There we go. That's where Robert makes mistakes sometimes too. All right. Okay, now we're going to apply this to some word problems. These are going to seem kind of confusing, but it's really a lot easier than it is going to seem at first. First few here says find the distance between 2 points, then answer the posed question. All that really means is there's a question after it. You're not just finding the distance. Okay, you're not getting just a number answer. That that number answer tells you an answer to another question, like a yes or no question about the real life situation. So in this case, it says Emos has a delivery radius of 20 miles. If Emos is located at 2, -3, will they deliver to 18, -5? Now, here's all that's really asking. The delivery radius is 20 miles. That means from Emo's location, they'll deliver 20 miles in any direction. That means that's the maximum distance they'll travel to deliver your pizza or salad or whatever else you're having. If you have this other location at 18, -5, this is really asking, is the distance less than or equal to 20? So we're just going to find the distance between these two ordered pairs and compare that to the number 20 and see if that answers my question, yes or no. You don't think they will. So I've already had somebody say they don't think they will. Let's find out. The distance between them. Since they give you the ordered pairs and not the graph, we have to use the distance formula. We're going to do the difference of the x's. So we're going to do 18 minus 2 squared. Then we're going to do the difference of the y's. -5 minus -3 turns into plus +3 squared. Okay? When we do 18 minus 2 first, that is 16, but then you'll have to square that. And -5 plus 3 is -2. We'll have to square that. 16 squared, kind of a big number. What is that? 256. -2 squared is just 4. So that's a square root of 260. Let's go ahead and write that as a decimal. Somebody in class here, tell me what we get. 16.1. Really close to 16.1. Is that less than 20?
Yes.
Will they deliver if it's less than 20? Yes. So someone said since. You said no. Since 16.1 is less than 20, they will deliver. Now, if you're doing this one on your own, most of the time you're just going to write a yes or no answer, but I want to see the work to back it up. Okay? Still writing no. That next one, we're going to skip that one. It works out the same way, just using different points. Okay, we're going to skip past that. All right. So this is a type of problem you're going to see again on quizzes and tests, so pay attention. So the first thing it says is draw the situation. All that means is plot and label the points. Okay, that's all you have to do is plot and label the points. You can draw, you can connect them with a line, but you don't have to get like detailed here. It says your house is located at 0, 0. Okay, so we need the X and Y axis here. Otherwise, this means nothing. Okay, so I'm going to put my X or my Y axis there, my X axis there, right through the middle. I should be able to fit everything there. It says your house is located at 0, 0. So right there at the origin, that is your house. I'll put an H for house. The park is located 3 blocks east, or east 3 blocks, and south 1 block. Well, we got to remember our directions. That's why I give you this little picture down here. North and south are there. East and west are there. So when it says the park is located east 3 blocks, as in from your house, we're going to go to the right 3 blocks. South 1 block means we're going to go down 1. So I'm going to plot that point. From my starting point at my house, I'm going to go to the right 3, down 1. And that is the park. So I'm going to label it with P for park. Yep, south 1 block. Then it gives me another location for something. So the park, by the way, before we go any further, let's write that ordered pair. What would the ordered pair be for the park then? 3, it's down 1, right? -1. Okay. Now let's find the coordinates of the gas station. That's the next one. Gas station is located west 5 blocks and north 4 blocks, again, from your house. So we're going back to the origin. We're going to go west 5 blocks. That's to the left 5, and north is up. Left 5, north 4. That puts the gas station way up there on the top left. Almost all the way at the top of the graph. Not quite. So the gas station would have coordinates of -5, 4. Those coordinates are going to be helpful as we do these things. All right. Question A asks, how far is the park from your house? Round to the nearest tenth. Since the question asks how far, we should use what formula? Distance. Good. When it asks the question how far, that's asking for a distance, round to the nearest tenth. So let's do our distance formula using the house coordinates and the park coordinates, P and H. We're looking for the length of segment HP. So the park is at 3, your house was at 0, so we do 3 minus 0 squared. The park was at -1 for the y values, your house is at 0, so -1 minus 0 squared. Okay, you could do that, or we could do a right triangle and use Pythagorean theorem. 3 squared plus 1 squared equals c squared. We get 3 squared plus 1 squared like that, which is 9 plus 1, or the square root of 10. What's the square root of 10? 3.2. So your house and park are 3.2 away from each other. We aren't given, we're measuring in blocks, actually. 3.2 blocks. Okay, next question. It says McDonald's is located halfway between your house and the gas station. Gas station this time. Find the coordinates of McDonald's. So since the question uses the word halfway, we should use which formula? Midpoint. See what I did there with McDonald's and midpoint? Midpoint. Okay, so the midpoint between your house and the gas station, we're going to use those coordinates. We're going to add the x's for house and gas stations. We're going to add -5 plus 0, divide by 2. Then add the y values, 0 plus 4, and divide by 2, or 4 plus 0. The order for addition doesn't really matter. Okay, -5 plus 0 is just -5. 0 plus 4, or 4 plus 0 is 4. So when I simplify this, let's give these as decimal answers. We've got -2.5 for the x value and +2 for the y value. So that would be the coordinates of McDonald's, halfway between those two. Okay. There is one final part to this lesson. We're going to talk about arc length. Arc length is something that we've done in the past from circles, but I'm going to show you an easier way to do it for just these types of problems. Okay. This was how we did arc length in the past. Okay. Arc length was L. Remember, an arc is a portion of a circle, like that. The length of that is a portion of the circle's circumference then. So we did L out of 2 pi r has to equal this angle measure, the central angle measure, x out of 360. We're not going to do that today because we're going to use specific parts of the circle, and it's only going to be one of two possibilities. Okay, so let me go through this example first. So let's say x is located at the origin, 0, 0. Okay, we're going to plot these points. Y is at 0, 7. Z is at -7, 0. So 0, 7, where is that on the graph? Like, if you had to tell somebody where to go, just go straight up from the origin to +7. 2, 4, 6, 7, right up there. That, another way of saying that is that that is on the positive y-axis. And Z is at -7, 0. So how would you describe where that is to somebody? -7, 0 for Z. Left 7 from where? From Y? From the origin, right? Not down, left. Okay, so X is the center of your circle. Z and Y are on the circle. So there's kind of my circle. Okay, the whole circle goes around like that. We don't have to do the whole thing, but it kind of helps you visualize it. But all I want to know is this length of the arc from Z to Y. Now, how much of the circle is that arc? As a fraction amount, how much of the circle would that be? A fourth, right? As a percentage, it'd be 25%, okay? Out of degrees, out of a full 360, that's 90 degrees, right? All you have to do is realize arc length is a portion of circumference. So we're going to take circumference and either divide by 4 for 1/4, or divide by 2 for 1/2, or if I do a full 3/4 like a major arc, I would divide by 4 and multiply by 3. Okay? So we're going to take our circumference. Do you guys remember the formula for circumference? It's on the board. I'm circling it.
2 pi r.
2 pi r. And then we're going to divide by how many quadrants we're using.
4.
We're using 4, so we divide by 4. Okay? So I'm actually going to do that. But the trick here is understanding what the radius is. What's the radius of the circle? 7. How'd you know that? 7 spaces. You're counting. These numbers here give you a radius. So we're going to do 2 times pi times 7, and then divide by 4. That we can do all in the calculator. Tell me what we get. Calculator. Use your calculator. Don't try and do it in your head. $11.0, right? It's like 10.99. Okay, 11.0. Very good. Okay, so as we look at this, these actually get even easier than that. You don't have to do a graph. Here's what you're always going to do. Okay, you're going to make a little mini graph just on blank white paper or whatever space you have to use. You're just going to draw your ordered or your coordinate plane, and we're going to put these points A and B. We're going to put them on there. They're either going to be on the positive y-axis or negative y-axis, or the positive x-axis or negative x-axis. So let's look at A first. 0, -3. Is that on positive y, positive x, or negative x?
Negative x.
0, -3. Do I go up, down, left, or right?
Left.
Down. X is 0. The first one's 0. So we go down 3. So A is down here. B is at 0, 3. Is that up, down, left, or right? Up.
3.
3. So if I'm doing an arc, that would be a half circle, wouldn't it?
Yes, sir.
So all I'm going to do, I'm going to take my circumference and divide by what? 2. It's half the circle. Divide by 2. So our circumference is 2 pi times my radius. And then we divide by, not squared, that's area. What is the radius of this circle? 3, the numbers. It'll never be a negative, so just whatever those numbers are, that's your radius. So that's 2 pi times 3 divided by 2. Sorry, I know it's kind of small for some of you in the back. 2 times pi times 3, then divide by 2. All right, let's confirm that. I've got a guess of 4.7. It's wrong. We are all over the place. Okay, so let me show you this. There's no square roots. We shouldn't be square rooting anything. I don't. Okay, so we do 2 times pi times the radius of 3 divided by 2. 9.4. Okay. Let's try another one. Let's do this one. Let's make our little mini graph. 9.4. Good. Okay. Let's plot these out. 0, -9. Where's 0, -9? Up, down, left, or right?
Down 9.
There's A. 0, 9. Up, down, left, or right? Okay, this is just like the last one, only our radius is different. Okay, what's the radius?
9.
Bingo. So we do 2 pi times 9 divided by, how much of the circle am I using? A half or a fourth? Half. So we divide by 2. Do that in the calculator. 2 times pi times 9 divided by 2. Say,
28.3.
raise your hand if you think it's 28.3. Good. 28.3. Okay, one more example here. Same idea, make our mini graph. A, is it 4, 0, up, down, left, or right?
Is right.
To the right. 4, 0. 4, 0 is to the right. B, 0, 4, up, down, left, or right? Up, there's B. So this is only a fourth of the circle. Okay, so we're going to do 2 pi r divided by 4 this time. What's the radius?
4, yeah.
No, not 0. 4. You're right. So we do 2 pi times 4 divided by 4. What'd you get? 6.3. That's how we're doing arc length here. You don't have to worry about proportions. You don't have to do anything else like that. Okay, so that finishes this lesson. The next assignment, we're going to just do a lot of these problems like this. I do give you selected answers to use on this worksheet, unlike last time, but the homework check will still have quite a few of those problems selected. All right.